So, this is really about, how to protect yourself, your family from forest fire, smoke, and generally poor air quality. Although currently, we've got this, fire situation going on in the greater LA area. This is not new. It's not unique for those of us who are residents of California. It's starting to become, old hat and kind of common. And if you look over certainly the last decade, we've had massive fires, certainly up in Northern California, particularly Marin County. Uh, we had the big fire in Malibu about 3 or 4 years ago. It's the nature of living in a relatively dry climate where there's a lot of, dryness, there's a lot of brush, and potentially a lot of wind, and all of that adds up to, creating the quote perfect storm for having these kind of situations. But again, I know we've also seen this in Oregon and Washington and Colorado. So for anyone tuning in, this might be relevant to what you're dealing with now if you're in Southern California, but this applies really to anyone who might live in an area where there is a lot of this kind of activity going on. So, you know, I think it's good to understand that what happens when you get these kind of fires that, as things are burning, it's aerosolizing all of these materials, and many of these are toxic and really harmful for our health. I mean, they can affect your lungs, of course, your heart, your brain, your eyes, and other organs. And it can be a compilation of a lot of different things, again, depending on what's burning. So when it's a straight up forest fire where there's really no structures involved, it might be one set of, chemicals and toxins. And in the case of like what we're seeing in Palisades and the Eaton fire, where it's a lot of buildings, that's going to aerosolize a whole different group of, chemicals. So, natural things that happen when you start combusting wood, trees and shrubs and things of that nature. We get carbon dioxide, we get methane, we get nitrous oxide, and there can be other types of toxic gases, carbon monoxide, hydrogen cyanide, ammonia. And we get lots and lots and lots of particulate matter. And that's a mix of ash and soot and other organic burn materials. Again, even down here in Orange County, and we're probably about 40-ish miles away from the nearest fire, you can still see, ash on people's cars, and it's been raining down these kind of things over the last week plus. Again, wind can take that particulate matter and can blow it potentially for dozens and dozens of miles. So, even if you're in an area that's not immediately affected, again, if you're downwind from where these things are blowing, you potentially can be impacted. There can be lots of volatile organic compounds, particularly like evergreen trees. And some of these trees have chemicals called terpenes, benzene, toluene, xylene, styrene, petrochemicals. I think about all the cars that we're burning. Think about everything that's in car. It's gasoline, it's oil, it's plastic, it's PVC, it's all these things that are now going to be part of the air in that area. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, many of these are known carcinogens. They can cause cancer, although it might be easy to see some of the particulate matter in the air. We can't see these smaller chemicals. We may not smell these smaller chemicals, and that doesn't mean that they're not in the air and can't affect us. And of course, you can get all these toxic metals, lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium, lithium. Think about a lot of these buildings that were built decades ago, back when they used lead paint. They used pressure treated wood with arsenic. There might have been other, pieces of equipment that had cadmium. And, I'm looking at all the Teslas that burned with these lithium batteries. All these things, again, can be potentially dangerous and toxic. And of course, all the plastics that burn, BPA, BPS, polyvinyl chloride. There's lots of different types of plastic and plasticizers that go in cars and buildings. And just the organic burning of pesticides and herbicides that people might use in and around their house, lawn. Again, all these potential things become part of that mix of what gets in the air supply. So I just took this from today. This is from the South Coast Air Quality Management District. And part of me kind of thinks it's incredulous that, the green is basically showing that the air quality is good, which I find remarkable that these fires are still burning. And When I checked today, the Palisades fire is only 19% contained, and the Eaton fire is about 35% contained. So there's still a lot of burning going on, and the wind just started dying down about, today or maybe yesterday afternoon. So, the way they're measuring this is by particulate matter. So that PM 2.5 you see is particulate matter 2.5 microns. So anything that's less than that, that's kind of their baseline of how they measure these particulates. And so it's particulate matter, it's ozone, which we call smog down here, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide. And I think the important thing to understand when they measure it, and it's this little line here, it says it does not account for other pollutants that may cause unhealthy air quality at times. And again, these are all the other chemicals and things that I don't think they're measuring. They're not measuring for toxic metals. They're not measuring for VOCs. They're not measuring for pesticides and herbicides and a lot of these other things. So it's good that a lot of the particulate matter has gone down. When you looked at this chart, less than a week ago, everything was red and orange and yellow. So a lot of that is starting to clear out of the air, but there is still potentially a lot of toxic stuff, particularly in and around those zones where the fires are still burning. And, I happened to be outside of New York City when 9/11 occurred, and I worked with a lot of frontline workers where, they were working over the Twin Towers, for months. And, even though the fires are, supposedly put out, remember underneath all of that decayed, material, there can be smoldering. There can still be these low level embers that continue to burn and continue to aerosolize a lot of these chemicals. So particularly if you're in an area, if you've been affected by these fires and you're going back to your home to try and salvage, whatever you can, or if you are a frontline worker and you're in the midst of this, be very careful and mindful that there is still burning going on, even though you're not seeing flames and it may not feel necessarily hot. There can be pockets of smoldering under the rubble that just hasn't been extinguished yet, and that can continue to aerosolize a lot of these potentially dangerous and toxic chemicals. So the human health risk to us is pretty broad. Again, our respiratory system, of course, and when we're breathing these things in, particularly if you already have a lung condition, if you're asthmatic, you have bronchitis, you have any kind of, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, bronchitis, bronchiectasis, you are at higher risk. Your lungs are already disposed. And a lot of that particulate matter in particular can be very irritating to the lungs. So it can cause asthma, congestion, tightness in the chest, coughing, wheezing, shortness of breath, nasal irritation, sinus infections, anything in that upper respiratory tract can be affected. It can also cause cardiovascular disease. It can cause your blood pressure to go up. It can cause a heart arrhythmia, particularly these chemicals, and it does increase risk of heart attack and stroke. It can cause neurological issues. People start complaining about brain fog, cognitive issues, memory issues, fatigue. And of course, anything that's exposed to the outside world, your mucous membranes in particular, so your eyes, your nose, your throat can be irritated. They can feel very itchy. And of course, there's the stress response of just having to deal with, evacuating. What it does to your autonomic nervous system can change. A lot of people dealing with anxiety and sleep disturbances. The long-term exposure, again, particularly those with, COPD, can be much greater. It's been associated with lung damage, lung cancer, potentially other kind of cancers. And certainly for people, again, who already have an allergic disposition, asthma, or mast cell activation, these are the kind of situations that can make you feel significantly worse. We've already heard from a handful of our patients that they've been having these, upper respiratory issues. They've been having irritation. Their allergies seem worse, even though this is a time of year for California that our allergies aren't generally terribly bad. So all this stuff in the air can potentially be an irritant. And again, you can look up at the sky and it might look perfectly clear and you don't see anything. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not out there and affecting you. So I think the first part of how we manage this is really particulate protection. Again, when there's a lot of particulates in the air, again, they can be direct irritants. So really it's been advised to stay indoors if you live near an area that's been affected and minimize your outdoor activity. you can check your air quality with your local state agency. So here in California, we have something called the AQMD. That's the Air Quality Management District, or the SC, the South Coast Air Quality Management District. And they publish updated data on air quality and pollution. So that graph I just showed you is for the AQMD. And it's good to check periodically to see at least what's being published. Again, I think it's a little misleading that it's not telling you the totality of everything that's in the air, but certainly for particulate matter, I think it's pretty reliable on how much particulate's out there. And so just being educated and aware about what's in your area, because again, when the air quality gets bad, you might want to do other things to protect yourself. And, right now, at least for people who are closer to that area, staying indoors for now is really a good idea. I know, a lot of people who live in those areas, they really like to be outdoors. Our weather's generally very nice here, so you can be outdoors year round. People like to hike through, Topanga Canyon and along the beaches. But again, if you're living in those areas, it's really advisable until those fires are really put out. And we know that things are safer to be out, to try and minimize your outdoor activity as much as possible, and try and do more stuff indoors. If you do have to be outdoors, this is a case where wearing a mask is actually very important and helpful. And you really want to wear either an N95 or a P100 mask. These actually filter out that small particulate matter. Um, I think there's a lot of confusion around masks, and I will tell you, I am not an OSHA expert, but having done this a while, I know that there are certain regulations around an N95 mask for occupational workers that use N95s quite often. So generally the rule is these masks are designed primarily for single use. They're not really designed to be used over and over and over. And we saw this a lot during the pandemic, where people were wearing the same N95 for a year because they were hard to come by. But generally speaking, these are designed for single use, depending on exposure. So, I was looking at the OSHA guidelines earlier, and generally they say if the exposure is low, there's not a lot of oily material, there's not a lot of soot, then you might be able to use it for up to 72 hours, or 3 days. If the air quality index is greater than 151, so just kind of going back to that chart, anything over 150 is considered unhealthy for sensitive groups. So this is what they consider unhealthy, 151 on up. It's absolutely, well, they say required to at least wear an N95, if not use a full respirator, because there's so much particulate, it can be very hazardous to your health. And they say if it's under, 150, it's not necessary, but might be advisable. So if you're going to be in an area where the air quality index does reach over 151, again, this is when they do recommend wearing a full respirator. And so this is the one that covers your eyes, your nose, your throat. You don't want any of your mucous membranes exposed. They generally have cartridges that go on it that filter out even more particulate matter. These masks, you really do want masks that are certified. I know one of the questions that came in is that, do you want kind of an OSHA certified mask? And the answer is probably yes, because, there's a lot of companies out there. And again, I think we saw this during the pandemic, that there were some pretty interesting, sketchy looking N95 masks being circulated. And I don't know if they really met the standards of an N95. So, it'll usually say on the label somewhere that it's an OSHA certified N95 mask. Some of them have an exhale valve, some of them don't. For the purposes here, I don't know that that matters, as long as it is a certified N95 mask or a P100 mask. And that's going to help make sure you're not getting all that particulate matter. Now, keep in mind, even with an N95, it is not filtering out chemicals. It's really only filtering out that very small dust, particulate matter that might be in the air, which is going to help really reduce irritation to your lungs, your mucous membranes. But, it still doesn't pull out the chemicals. So unless you've got a full respirator with a specific filter that filters out chemicals, that's really the only way to protect yourself from that kind of exposure. And I think really you're probably only seeing that in firefighters, frontline workers who are still in the midst of all of it. They're all wearing respirators, but for the general public, Most people are using N95s. And I think, again, N95s are going to do an adequate job for what people need to protect themselves from all that small particulate matter, from the dust, from the soot, from whatever else is blowing around. Again, it's not going to necessarily protect against the chemicals, but with the chemicals, it is also a function of distance and dilution. So the further you're away from it, the less likely the chemicals are going to be as problematic. But just be aware that those masks are not designed to filter out chemicals. The other thing I think is really interesting, and this is even in an OSHA report, is that they found during crises, the majority of people who have N95s do not wear them correctly. So if you have an N95, you need to make sure that you are wearing it correctly. And typically there's two bands, that one that goes kind of on the top of your head, one behind your neck to secure a tight fit. You want to make sure that, especially around the nose and the mouth, it is tight, that there's no air gaps. You need to pinch the little metal piece at the top to secure the nose, make sure it fits tight around the mouth. And anyone with facial hair needs to cut it off. That facial hair creates a gap. And so people with beards and goatees and mustaches, if it's impairing your ability for that mask to fit tightly, you are not getting the benefits of the mask. It might look good, but it is not doing what it's intended to do. So it's always recommended to shave facial hair, ensure that this line between the nose, around the mouth, is tight so that that mask is fitting appropriately, and then you're getting all the benefits. I do also recommend that, getting good high quality indoor air filters that has a minimum efficiency reporting value. We call it a MERV rating of 9 or greater. And the reason is that the MERV rating tells you how efficient it is at pulling out that small particulate matter. I'll give you some links at the end of the talk on air filters that I like. I specifically like Air Doctor, and I'll include a link at the end. But the Air Doctor I like because it's got both a HEPA and a carbon filter. So it's going to pull out small particulate matter. It's going to pull out chemicals. And I generally recommend for people to keep one in their bedroom and then one in whatever common area you happen to spend a lot of time. Obviously, this is going to depend on the size of your home, how open each room one is to another. If you live like in a studio apartment, one filter is probably going to be adequate. If you live in a 6,000 square foot house, you're probably going to need multiple. Even if you've got an HVAC system that's got a good air filter on it, the problem is the volume of air a house is pushing through a standard HVAC system. It's so large, although it will filter out some of that stuff, of course. It's not going to be nearly as efficient as using an individual air filter, just because those air filters can cycle the air in a particular area much faster. So particularly for those people who might be closer to where the fires are occurring, turn the filter on high, let it run nonstop. If you need to turn it down at night just for sound so it's not annoying you, almost all these good air filters have some sort of adjustment for the fan to turn it down a little bit. But generally, you want to try and let it run as high as possible to filter out that air. And again, a little bit closer you are to the fires or the smoke, you want to make sure that's running consistently. It's also really important to stay very well hydrated. Dehydration and dry mucous membranes can make that particulate matter even worse. It can be more irritating when you're not well hydrated. So just make sure that water and electrolytes are part of your daily regimen to stay well hydrated. There's a lot of nutrients that can be helpful in protecting yourself against some of the ill effects of the smoke, of the chemicals, of the VOCs. And again, I don't know that we're going to get the complete truth of what's in the air. Again, I know this happened around 9/11 when, the government kept kind of assuring everybody that the air's fine, the air's fine. And of course, we found out after the fact that it wasn't fine, that there was a lot of very toxic stuff being in the air for, again, many, many months after the fact. So I don't know how much we'll really understand about what's in the air. And I don't know at this point who's really testing for these other types of things. But knowing that this is what happened when things burn, I think as much as we can do to protect our bodies, protect our brain, protect our lungs is smart. And so vitamin C is a major antioxidant. It's anti-cancer. It helps support your immune system, supports collagen formation. That can just be a good overall thing to cover a lot of bases. And vitamin E, I also like because it actually helps protect against cell membrane damage and also a major antioxidant. So again, a lot of these chemicals and even some of the particulates in it, can cause oxidative damage. So anything that's antioxidant can help potentially offset that fact. And again, some things that are rich in antioxidants also help tend to prevent, any kind of cancer that might form. Selenium's also a major antioxidant, also helps support immune function. Zinc, I like zinc picolinate, supports the immune system and tissue repair. So again, if there has been any kind of irritation, lung damage, tissue damage, zinc is one of those nutrients that can help repair that tissue a little bit more efficiently. NAC is N-acetylcysteine. This is an amino acid. It's actually a precursor to another compound called glutathione. And glutathione is really one of our most important antioxidants. It also helps support liver detoxification. It's one of the ways our liver gets rid of a lot of junk. So again, if you've been exposed to different toxins and we're not sure what, this is a really great way to try and help get that stuff out of your body more efficiently. NAC itself is also a very potent mucolytic. So we use it for people when they start to get really thick mucus. It basically thins the mucus out and it makes it a little easier to cough it up and get rid of or expectorate. So for people who've been having or had a lot of smoke inhalation, smoke damage, and they feel like they're, got this big plug of mucus in their throat, NAC can be very effective to help kind of thin that out. My caution with NAC is sort of twofold. One, if you already have stomach issues, if you've got ulcers, if you've got gastritis, NAC can be irritating for some people in the stomach. So you just have to be a little bit careful with it. And NAC, if you take it long term, can deplete zinc. So this is why, we like zinc in there as well to help cover that so you don't induce any kind of accidental nutrient deficiency. Most people aren't on these for that long, but if you are, then you just want to be mindful of that. I actually like just giving straight glutathione. So I'll use NAC again when there is a lot of thick mucus and I really want to uh, help clear that up so that we can get rid of the gunk, because again, if that thick mucus is in there, it's going to kind of trap everything else that's coming in, so it'll trap more particulate, more chemical, more whatever else you're breathing. So if we can thin it out, get it out, it's just less likely to become this reservoir that also can turn into infection. When that mucus starts to build up, whether it's in your nose, your throat, your chest, again, that's what predisposes to throat infections, sinus infections, lung infections. And then now we've got a secondary problem we've got to deal with now combating the infection. So this can be an effective way to reduce that risk as well. I like specifically liposomal glutathione. Glutathione is one of these molecules that can be relatively hard to absorb. So when they put it in a liposomal form, it just makes it a little bit easier um, to absorb and get across the cell membrane. So again, potent antioxidant, promotes liver detoxification, and also glutathione is very nutritive to the nervous system. Your nerve cells use a lot of glutathione. So if you've been exposed to any type of chemical that's affecting your brain, your central nervous system, so when we hear about brain fog and we hear about numbness and tingling and neuropathy and kind of weird motor or sensory distortions, I always think about glutathione as something to add to the mix to ensure the integrity of our neurological cells. Omega-3 fatty acids are very important for supporting cell membranes. Again, if anything in the cell membrane gets damaged, omega-3 fatty acids can help repair that. Also very good anti-inflammatory and supports cardiovascular health. Glycine's an amino acid that's the most basic amino acid, and actually it's been shown to help remove solvents as part of liver detoxification. Glycine has another interesting effect. It actually binds to a part of the brain called the locus coeruleus, which actually is the inhibitory part of the brain. So for people that can't turn their brain off, have trouble sleeping, feel stressed, glycine sometimes kind of has this night kind of sedating effect. Not sedating like, medication, but sedating in just sort of a mellow kind of thing. And so for people who also deal with the other things, glycine can be a very nice way to help that. But I like it particularly for, fire and smoke damage, just because of this effect on acetylation, which is one of the pathways our liver detoxifies toxic chemicals. There's a lot of herbs that can be incredibly helpful. Mullein verbascum thapsus is a very good herb. It's very soothing to the lungs. Demulcent, just I mean, it's kind of soothing to mucous membranes, and it's a good expectorant. So it's another good way if you've got this mucus that you're trying to cough it up. Mullein's also a very nice tasting herb, so that's something that people can use. There's one called L-campaign. L-campaign or Inula helenium is an expectorant. It's anti-inflammatory. Antitussive means it stops the cough. Antimicrobial, antispasmodic. So we like L-campaign for, again, people who are coughing a lot, they're feeling congested. We want to get the mucus up. We want to stop the annoying cough, and the antimicrobial, because again, that mucus can create an environment where it's easier for bacteria and viruses to take root and cause a secondary problem. So really helpful for that chronic ongoing spasmodic cough. Yerba Santa or Aerodictium californicum, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. It protects the neurons. And again, it's also a mucolytic, breaks down that mucus. So often we'll combine these herbs. I'm talking about them individually, but there's a lot of companies that make formulas that mix the different things for lung support. And again, I'll give you a little bit more information about that at the end of the talk. Milk thistle is an incredibly important herb. I don't know. I think I'm kind of at a point where I think just about everybody benefits from being on milk thistle. Again, it's a major antioxidant. It protects the liver against any kind of toxic damage, whether it's from fire smoke, pesticides, medication, any kind of thing that might be toxic to the liver. Milk thistle can really help. It's also a well-known anti-cancer herb and anti-inflammatory, and it's incredibly safe. I like it because it is safe. It doesn't really interact with other medications, other supplements. It's very well tolerated. But I think, again, for anyone who's close to the fires, this would be, if I had to pick any herb, this is the one I think everybody should be on. Plantago lanceolata or plantain. This is not plantain, the banana, by way. This is plantain, which is actually a weed. It's anti-inflammatory. It's a great expectorant, and it's also astringent. So, if you start to get kind of, you've probably heard of leaky gut. Well, you can have leaky lungs. And again, anything that's astringent kind of helps tighten up the junctions in the lungs to make it a little bit more improve the integrity of the cells. And plantain has a nice flavor to it. So again, plantain's often added with some of these other ones for extra support. And one that people don't really talk about, but I like, is Bacopa. Bacopa monnieri protects the liver. It's antioxidant. It's neuroprotective, anti-inflammatory, and it's adaptogen. Most of the research on Bacopa is around memory loss. We use it for people with early dementia and Alzheimer's, but I find it can also be incredibly helpful when there's brain fog. There seems to be something else that might be causing mast cell activation in the brain. Bacopa can be quite beneficial. And so that's one that if you're dealing with more of the neurological issues, I would definitely think about adding Bacopa to the mix. Essential oils of various herbs can also be incredibly helpful. I listed thyme and eucalyptus specifically just because that's what I tend to use the most, but there's actually a lot of essential oils that have antimicrobial effects. They're bronchodilators. They can open up the lungs, make it easier to breathe. If you're wheezing, if you feel tight in the chest, these essential oils can help open things up. Again, they help reduce spasms in the lungs, and they also help you expectorate and get rid of the junk. So essential oils, I don't really use a lot orally, but you can apply a little bit near your nasal passages. So you can put a little dab under your nose. They do make like a natural like chest rub that has eucalyptus. It's the menthol in it that, again, when you breathe it in, can help open things up. So it's great for opening the nose, opening the throat, opening the lungs as another way to try and help get stuff out. But the fact it also has a little bit of antimicrobial effect can be helpful. So I usually recommend just to get a diffuser. You can put a couple of drops in a diffuser and just breathe it in, or again, you can just apply it locally around the opening of your nose. Gumweed is Grandilia caporum. Gumweed is antispasmodic, expectorant, anti-asthmatic. You're probably familiar with elderberry. We use elderberry often a lot with children. Again, it's a berry. It tastes good. But Sambucus nigra, again, helps with spasms. It's soothing to the lungs, antimicrobial, also helps prevent the production of mucus. So if you've got children in particular that have been dealing with any of these kind of issues, and particularly if they're affecting the lungs, elderberry can be incredibly effective, and kids actually like it and will take it. Hyssop officinalis is an antispasmodic, anti-inflammatory expectorant. Coltsfoot, Tussilago farfara, also demulcent, soothing to the lungs, anti-cough, expectorant, anti-mucus. Wild cherry is another one that's really great for kids, Prunus serratina. It's astringent, it's anti-cough, it's expectorant. And again, you'll see some of these combinations out there that has a little elderberry, a little bit of mullein, a little bit of wild cherry. So I wanted to mention them individually just so you understand what these herbs are doing. So you can buy them individually. You can find a lot of products where they're mixed together, but this is what they're doing. And again, a lot of these are really geared around helping the upper respiratory tract. There are other herbs as well. Barberry, which is Berberis aquifolium, is antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory. Again, I like some of these things that are antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory because of the secondary effect of what the smoke, what the ash, what the particulate, what the chemicals can do to the upper respiratory tract. Cat's claw, Uncaria tomentosa. I use one specifically called Cemento from Nutrimetics. It's a great anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and actually helps relax the bronchioles, can stop some of that spasmodic cough. Berber panella is a combination of two herbs. It's Desmodium malignum and Pimpinella anisum, which is anise. This helps promote liver detoxification and also mucolytic. Dandelion, particularly dandelion root, it's diuretic. It promotes liver detoxification, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. I generally like to use whole dandelion, which has the leaf and the root. The leaf is a better diuretic. The root is better for liver detoxification. So if you get the whole plant, you kind of get both benefits. And again, very well tolerated, very safe, doesn't interfere with other medications. But I think dandelion is one of those things, again, that probably a lot of people should take on some regular basis, just because the kidney and the liver are the primary ways we get rid of a lot of our toxins. And just having something that helps push it through a little bit more efficiently can be quite helpful. And it's dandelion. And if you like dandelions, you can actually eat dandelion leaf. You can put it in your salad. It's bitter, but it's safe. Curcumin or curcuma longa is liver protective, anti-cancer, very potent anti-inflammatory, and it also helps increase bile salts. So bile is the stuff in the liver that conjugates all the toxic stuff, and that's what will arouse our body to get rid of it. So I use a lot of curcumin. Again, I use it mostly for the anti-inflammatory effects, but again, it does have this capacity to increase the bile production. Black seed oil, you might have heard of black seed oil. We used it a lot during the pandemic. It actually worked quite well against COVID. But Nigella sativa also helps protect the liver, antioxidant, expectorant, also helps protect the kidneys, and good antimicrobial. I was going to say one more thing about herbs and escapes my mind. So we'll keep moving on. So there are other detoxification strategies. I know that there are some, doctors that promote doing like these short-term liver cleanses, and look, those are fine. I don't think of detox that way. I think of detox as being this long-term strategy to help your body constantly move things out. We're exposed to toxins all the time. I think obviously with the fires and things going on now, there is a higher load, but in general, this is part of our world, and our world is not getting less toxic. So I think about what are things we can do on an ongoing basis to keep our load down. We use the concept in environmental medicine that we're all born with a barrel, and some of us have a very big barrel and some of us have a shot glass. But when the barrel overflows, that's when people become symptomatic. And the really people who are really chemically sensitive, hypersensitive to different things, find little bits go a long ways, probably have a very small barrel. And there's the other people who can drink a pot of coffee and smoke and do all these things, and they get no ill health effects. They probably have a very large barrel, and their body's very efficient at getting rid of toxic stuff. So, we're all a little bit different, and it's a combination of genetics and environmental exposure of, what are the things that pull the trigger on our cells that cause all these kind of reactions. And again, that's going to vary a lot from person to person. So again, in my world, I'm not as big of a fan of doing these short-term detox things. I'd rather do things that are going to be more of a long-term ongoing thing. So something like dry brushing can be very helpful. The lymph system is the part of the system where a lot of the toxins dump into before they get into the bloodstream. Your lymph vessels are very superficial to the skin, and there's really no pressure behind your lymphatics. Your blood has a heart that pumps, and that's what pushes the blood throughout your system, but the lymph doesn't really do that. It needs movement to move things. So dry brushing, you can just literally get a soft brush, and before you jump in the shower, you just start brushing from your toes all the way up, from your fingertips all the way up, and you push everything towards your heart. And it's just a very inexpensive, easy way to try and help move that lymph. There are therapists out there that do specific lymphatic massage. Again, it's not like deep tissue massage, it's very light and gentle, but that can be a way if someone else can help you manually move the lymph. Just both are good ways to get that flow going. I am a huge fan of sauna. I think sauna, particularly infrared sauna, is probably the most efficient way you can detoxify your body. We know from some of the work from Dr. Steve Ingenuous, who's a medical doctor who's done research on sauna, that in your sweat, you get lead and mercury and mycotoxins and chemicals and all sorts of things. So your skin really is your largest detox organ, and it can be used when you get in a sauna to literally sweat out a lot of this toxic stuff. So if you have access to a sauna, and I'll give you some information at the end on saunas that I like that are portable. We want you to sweat for about 20 to 30 minutes. It's just it takes about that much time to start mobilizing it out of the deeper tissue, and then you start to sweat it out. And even when you get in a sauna, it's not just about what comes out of sweat. Once you mobilize it out of tissue, some of it will get in the bloodstream, and again, we will eliminate it through the kidneys or through the stool. It's just important to stay very well hydrated when you're in a sauna. We don't want to accidentally dehydrate you. So water with electrolytes, before and after doing a sauna is always a wise thing, just to keep your hydration status up. Castor oil packs also, I think, are another great, inexpensive, easy thing that anybody can do. You basically get organic castor oil. Your liver is on the right side of your body, just underneath the rib cage. You just put some castor oil right over that part of your body. You get some wax paper or parchment paper, put it over that. And then if you have a heating pad or a hot water bottle, you just put it over the top. So the wax paper or parchment paper is just to protect your heat source from getting oily. Castor oil is very thick. It's kind of the consistency of honey. And then, you sit there for 20, 30, 45, 60 minutes while you're at night watching TV, reading a book. And again, it's just a way to help kind of move things through the liver, through the gallbladder. We've been using this in naturopathic medicine for many, many years. And again, it's a very inexpensive, easy thing. My recommendation is if you do castor oil packs, just make sure you get organic castor oil that's in glass. Often you'll see it in plastic, and we don't want to accidentally start putting plastics into your body. We're trying to do the opposite. Any kind of movement or exercise will be helpful, particularly if you can exercise to the point where you're sweating. Again, right now, if you're in an affected area, I wouldn't do it outdoors. So if you've got a gym that has good filtration, if you've got something you can do at home inside, that's going to be better for now. But as much as you can move your body, and particularly if you can break a sweat, again, all movement is helpful. It's still going to move lymphatics, but if you can even break a sweat, that will give you an extra bonus of getting that stuff out through the skin. Epsom salt baths, again, another very inexpensive, easy thing, as long as you have a bathtub, that you can just put, some Epsom salt, which is magnesium sulfate, into the bath. It's not quite the same as doing a sauna, but it is a way, again, that you can help start getting things out of tissue, and it actually feels kind of nice. And of course, as much as you can eat a clean diet, adding processed foods, junk foods, when your total load's already higher, it just adds more to the load, more stress on the liver, harder for the liver to do what we want it to do to get rid of the really bad toxic stuff. So, eat as clean as you possibly can. Now, I always recommend organic food when possible. We know a lot of the food supplies now contaminated with glyphosate or Roundup. And that just, again, adds more to the load. So, if you already have fatty liver or any other kind of metabolic illness, you need to be even extra careful about your diet. But again, anything we can do right now to reduce your total body burden, reduce your load, is going to be potentially beneficial for you. And I think it's hard, given what's going on in the last week, to not talk at least a little bit about stress management, particularly again if you're in one of these affected areas. I think anything you can do to try and take the load of stress off, because of what stress does to your hormones, your nervous system, your catecholamines, all of that can have a negative impact on the body. And I mean, rightfully so. We've got, now thousands of people that lost their livelihood. They lost everything. They lost their memories. And it's not fair to say, hey, it's just stuff. It's way more than that. So I think anything we can do to help manage that stress, again, is helpful. And whether it's meditation or what we call conscious breathing exercises, when you consciously focus on your breath, it actually helps stimulate your vagus nerve, which is your largest parasympathetic nerve, that can get you in a more calm, relaxed state. We can't erase what's happened, but we can try and help your body manage it as best as possible. So even if it spends, 5, 10 minutes, sitting someplace quiet where you can try to relax and breathe. And, we do something called box breathing, where there's different versions of it, where, you inhale for 4 or 7 seconds, hold for 4 or 7 seconds, breathe out for 4 or 7 seconds, and exhale. So it's just, inhale, hold, exhale, hold, and you keep repeating that. But by doing that very consciously and slowly, again, you stimulate the vagus nerve. That starts to calm things down. I think as much as you can have, local support network. Obviously, there's a lot of people going through a lot right now, and I think the one encouraging thing that we've seen, certainly in the media, is communities coming together, helping one another in whatever way possible. So as much as you can reach out to your local community for that support is helpful, and having just a place to share and grieve can be helpful. If it means getting a counselor, a therapist, someone you can talk to more one-on-one about everything you're going through, like, obviously that can be very beneficial. Exercise, is one of the better ways the human body has to de-stress. And I know, for, again, people who are going through a lot right now, I'm sure this is one of the last things on your list that I need to do right now. But again, if you can allow yourself a little bit of time to take care of your body while you're going through all this, again, it only helps. I think with the stress, that puts a lot of pressure on cortisol, adrenal hormones. We talk about adrenal stress. And so, again, there's a lot of herbs that can help balance the adrenals given the stress. So things like rhodiola, holy basil, Siberian ginseng, ashwagandha, licorice, American ginseng. There's a lot of these herbs that have the ability that if something's too high, it brings it down in the middle, and if it's too low, it brings it up. So I can imagine there's a lot of people whose cortisol levels are probably through the roof right now, and anything we can do to bring that down, because that affects your sleep, that affects your blood sugar metabolism, it affects your appetite. When people go through these big stressful events, often they're not eating very much and they're not sleeping. And again, when this goes on long term, that has other downstream effects. So again, as much as we can mitigate that, these plants can be very helpful in kind of getting your body a little bit more balanced. And there's other things we call nervines. There's not really a drug that does this, but nervines are plants that basically help calm your nervous system, but they don't make you tired. So we use something like L-theanine, which comes from the green tea plant. It has this nice quieting effect on the body. Passion flower, lemon balm, California poppy, all of these herbs are very helpful in just sort of calming the nervous system down. And then, there's something out there called Rescue Remedy, which is a Bach flower remedy. And I like this a lot, particularly for children, as a way to kind of help, calm the nervous system down and help get the body in a little bit more relaxed state. I've got these links here for you. And what I do is I will go and post them in the chat as well in a little bit. But what I did is I put a link in here for Air Doctor. This is the air filter that I use. Um, I know through our link, they usually give you a discount. I know Air Doctor has been running a special. They're actually based out of LA, so they've been running specials anyway on some of their air filters. But nonetheless, I don't know if our link gives you an additional discount or not, but I know it gives a discount at least off the regular price. And then what I also did, I gave you two other links down at the bottom on some of the portable saunas that I like and use. So if you're interested in checking that out, Relax Sauna and Therasage are both great portable saunas. I know with Therasage, I have a code, Dr. Darin. I know that gets you at least 10% off. And then I think Relax Sauna, I think there's a little discount as well. So I'll put those in the chat in a little bit. And then what I also did is I went into our FullScript account and I just put together a group of supplements that's a lot of things that we talked about tonight. So if it's something you're interested in, and you don't have to go hunt and peck and try and find all these things, you can click on that link. And with FullScript, if you've never used it before, I know a lot of us in functional medicine use FullScript. You have to create a FullScript account first, but once you create the account and log in, it'll take you to a group of things I put together for smoke and fire damage. And again, it's a lot of the nutrient herbs. So if you don't want to have to hunt and peck, and then I also just put a general link to our FullScript account if you want to look on your own and see what else is in there. But the nice thing about FullScript is they have a lot of the professional line companies that, the quality is good and they do third-party testing and so forth. But that other link, which is specific for fire and smoke, again, is a list of the things. That's really kind of what we talked about today. And this is just our information. I guess I didn't introduce myself at the beginning. I guess people who shut up probably at least know who I am. But if not, I'm Darin Ingels, and I'm a naturopathic doctor. I am also a fellow with the American Academy of Environmental Medicine. So in our clinic, we deal a lot with environmental medicine issues, which is why I really wanted to do this talk, because it's something that we've dealt with for a very long time. And we're trained and are aware of the kind of issues that come up when these kind of things happen. And the other doctor in my office, Dr. Jessica Tran, she is the first naturopathic doctor that's actually board certified in environmental medicine. And she's also an expert in toxicology. So the two of us are there. And if for any reason people feel like they want someone a little bit more in their corner to help with some of the health issues, I will leave this screen up for the meantime for that information. But someone says, what air purifiers do you recommend for smoke and VOC? So I already covered that. So again, I like Air Doctor just because, again, they have different models. And just so you know, if you look at their website, some of the models have the chemical filter, the carbon filter, and some of them are do not. I think they've got a model, I think 2000, 2500, 3000, 3500. I think the 3000 on up are the ones that have the carbon filters. So again, when you're looking at their website, just make sure you have one of the models that has the carbon filter. There are other good air filters. It's not just Air Doctor. I mean, Blue Air also has a good air filter that has a carbon filter. Austin Air has a good air filter. IQ Air is a very good company. I've got all of these different filters between my house and my office. And, I think they all work very well. I think for the price and for the efficiency, I like the Air Doctor the best. But Blue Air is also a good one. And again, IQ Air is great, but they're very expensive and their replacement filters are very expensive. So I think my preference is to use Air Doctor. Next question is, we recently moved to Montana from California. I would just like to know how to protect myself, husband, and parrot from the summer wildfires. So I think, I kind of covered that and we talked about for both particulate matter and other nutrients and herbs you can take. So hopefully I think that answered that question. Someone says, in addition to local and state pollution control agencies, can one watch weather forecasts for jet stream patterns to help identify where toxic air is likely to be more problematic? That's actually a great idea. And yes, I mean, the jet stream is going to tell you to a certain degree where the wind is going to go. And that's really what weather forecasters are basing that forecast on, is on how the jet stream flowing. So the reason we get these Santa Ana winds in California is the jet stream does a very unusual pattern where, usually our air is flowing from the ocean inland. And what happens is when the jet stream kind of goes the other way, it blows it from the desert down. And so when it comes down the side of the mountain, it speeds up. And if you didn't hear, at the first day or two that we had the fires, they were getting Category 2 hurricane winds. I mean, 92, 93 miles an hour. And that's why these fires really just took off very quickly, because the wind was so strong. And because the wind was so strong, they weren't able to get air support with the planes and the helicopters that do water drops or fire retardant. And so I think it took maybe 36 hours after the fire started before it was safe enough to get airplanes and helicopters in the air. So yeah, I mean, if you're concerned, and particularly again, if it's been a dry season, you're worried about fires, or if a fire's already started, again, you can go on and take a look at the jet stream, and it'll give you a pretty good idea where the jet stream flowing, where you live, which way the wind is going to be blowing. If you have MCS, multiple chemical sensitivity, and are very sensitive to chemicals in the air, are there supplements that are helpful or other modalities that can help? Again, I think I covered that in tonight's presentation. I'm in Santa Rosa, California, and I check my air quality daily and see it's poor. I also have an indoor air filter. What else can I do to protect myself? Should I avoid strenuous outdoor exercise like running, which I need to get rid of my gut? Yeah, exactly. I think, right now when the air quality is bad, limit your outdoor activities as much as possible. Try and stay indoors. And when I say indoors too, indoors with filtered air. Staying indoors in a cabin with no filter may not be drastically different. So hopefully wherever you are indoors, whether it's your home, your work, or a gym, they have good filtration systems that's going to make your indoor air quality much safer. Um, Someone's asking about N95 mask. I'm confused about which kind. Again, I think I addressed it that yes, I would get an OSHA approved N95 mask. And again, you can generally find these at any home supply store, Home Depot, Lowe's. You can find them online. I know they were in very short supply during the pandemic, but now you can find them. So just double check the label, make sure those are approved, and make sure you have a good fit on your face. Is it important it has an exhalation port? No, it's not essential. The whole thing with the exhalation port is really more about what's coming out of you. So I think, for fire, smoke damage, we're probably less concerned about what's coming out of you. That may be a bigger issue if you're sick and you're worried about coughing on someone, that you don't want the exhalation port. But if it's really more for protecting against particulate matter, I think it's okay. Does oxygen or molecular hydrogen out with the lungs during low quality days? I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure I understand what the question is. If you happen to be live online and you want to post your question again in the Q&A, maybe you can clarify that for me. Do you recommend saline nasal rinses to prevent entry into nasal cavity, or just wear a mask? Yeah, I mean, I think anything you can do to wash out your sinuses. I don't know that a saline rinse by, I'm talking about like spraying saline up your nose. If you're going to do like a full neti pot, that can be really helpful, because as you put saline in, it comes out the other side. It can rinse out particulate matter, rinse out the mucus that might be starting in there. So yeah, I think saline rinses, if it's like a neti pot. There's a company called NeilMed that you can find at every pharmacy in the country. It's got a squirt bottle and a packet of salt that gives you the right proportion of water to salt. And you just put warm water and you kind of do half the bottle on one nostril, half on the other. And I always recommend doing these in the shower just because it's messy and it's much easier to kind of make a mess in the shower and then rinse yourself off versus trying to lean over a sink and do this. But yes, that can be incredibly helpful to protect against getting anything trapped in your nasal passages. Stacy's asking, for the vitamins and herbs, is it the daily recommended dose on the bottle? The answer is maybe. you know, um, it sometimes the dosing recommended is lower. At minimum, as an adult, you can follow the recommended dose on there. Again, if you need more information, I'd recommend to work with someone who's trained in environmental medicine, who knows whether it's safe and appropriate for you based on your health, based on other medications or supplements you take. Is it safe to go up? Fortunately, with almost everything I talked about, it's really hard to take too much, even if you took more than the recommended dose. But to err on the side of caution, stick to the recommendation on the bottle. Usually there's a panel of somebody who's reviewed the dose recommendations, and at least you're going to be safe with that. Michael's asking, oh, Happy New Year's, thank you. With portable infrared saunas, could you give your thoughts on the pros and cons of different higher temperatures, preheating, and anything else to keep in mind before buying a unit? Yeah, I mean, low and slow with sauna is generally the better way to detoxify. So lower temperature, longer period of time is generally safer. So I'd rather people be like at 120 to 130 for 30 to 40 minutes versus 160 for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. We need to give your body time to start mobilizing those toxins out of tissue. And although it might take a little bit longer to get to a point where you start sweating, what often happens when people go in at really high temperature, it gets to be so uncomfortable that you just don't want to stay in longer. So I say, start low and slow. You can always increase the time and temperature as tolerated. That's fine, but better to kind of start off easy. That's one of the things I really like about relaxed sauna is that relaxed sauna heats in about 3 minutes. Even therasage is a little bit slower to get to the temperature. I used to have a big box sauna when I lived in Connecticut that was in my basement, which of course was always colder than the rest of the house. And it would take sometimes an hour and a half just to get it up to 120. And I know everyone's time is precious, so we don't want to spend a lot of time waiting for the sauna just to heat up. So these portable units are great because they generally heat up pretty quick. You can control the temperature on it, but just start low and slow. You're also asking which saunas are popular in the market. Again, the ones I recommended, Relax Sauna and Therasage, are my favorites. I like the fact they're both portable, so if you don't have a lot of real estate to have a full-time sauna setup like the big box saunas, these go up and down in about 5 minutes. They're pretty easy to put together. And yeah. From your view, for those who were in fires, what starting dose or range we say for all the supplements and herbs you covered tonight for adults' bodies and those of children that seem to make the difference for intended effects? So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a little bit individual for everybody. I know I covered a lot of different things. So, like, where's the place to start? It kind of depends too on how people have been affected. If you're having more lung issues, I would obviously want things that have a bigger impact on the lungs. If you're having more, GI issues, we might want things more for the liver and so forth. So I know that's not a great answer, but it's really going to be a function of what kind of impact you are having. And again, if you're just wanting to get ahead of it, you're not really having a lot of symptoms, you just want to protect yourself. Again, the doses on the bottles recommended are usually, uh, you know, a good place to start. And again, the dosing for children is usually on the bottle as well. You usually give for adults and for children. So that's always kind of a good place. Um, I'll come back to this for a second, Michael. I'll pull up that screen again and I can go back through and talk a little bit more. Michael also says, I arrived late after you finished the particulate section, so let me know if we covered this. For those who can afford it, if one was in a fiery area indoors and breathed in black smoke, which things you mentioned tonight, or in addition, would you recommend consuming or doing a lot of within minutes and hours of exiting the fire? So for people who've been like an acute fire like that, I mean, anything you got to do to get the smoke, the particulate kind of out of your lungs. So you want a lot of expectorants to start clearing that smoke, that inhaled stuff, whatever it's going to be. So again, any of the herbs I talked about that are expectorants, I would definitely want those on board. I would absolutely want glutathione on board to help protect the lungs against lung cancer and further damage. I think those would be the two most important things. You can actually get other nebulized medicines. I didn't really talk about it tonight because these are prescriptions. These are things you're going to have to work with the doctor for. But you can use cromolyn sodium, which is a mast cell inhibitor that can also stop a lot of the irritation. And in some cases, we will nebulize glutathione for patients. Right now, there's a war in California with the California Pharmacy Board that they're trying to ban glutathione. So I'm not sure how much longer that might be available. But um, in the meantime, until it's banned, again, your lungs use a lot of glutathione. So I would definitely want someone on nebulized glutathione if they had that kind of acute fire exposure to reduce the risk. Dr. Yu, hello, welcome. Is it correct to say that the reusable N95 equivalent masks are not recommended? Yeah, I mean, none of these N95s are really designed to be reusable long term, reusable within the matter of how much exposure there is. So again, for people who are getting a lot of exposure, remember a filter is exactly that. It's filtering and trapping all that stuff from the outside. So if there's a lot of particulate matter in your N95, it's going to start clogging that filter, and then the filter is not going to be nearly as effective. So again, when I looked at the OSHA regulations, they kind of said if there's not a lot of material, it might be good for about 72 hours. But this idea that you're going to be able to use it and be as efficient longer, particularly again, if you're in an area where there is a lot of smoke and these kind of things, you're probably going to want to change it more frequently. Someone says, what do you think about the biomat? Yeah, the biomat is, a type of PEMF device, pulsed electromagnetic frequency. PMF does a lot of good things for the body. It's not harmful. I don't know how much specifically it would help in these situations. Part of what it does is it can help, with cell repair. It can help with circulation. So based on that alone, again, wouldn't be harmful. So if someone has access to a biomat, yeah, wouldn't be another bad idea of things to do to protect yourself. Michael says if one has suffered some burns from embers or more severe from being inside a fiery building, not sure what the common protocol in these situations. One drives to take an ambulance to the hospital, other than IV fluids, anything to nudge hospital staff, or they may agree to mitigate the total negatives of burns or smoke breathe in. Hospital staff, ER doctors are very well trained on dealing with burns, smoke inhalation. I mean, they see, people who've been in fires, firefighters who get acute, smoke exposure. So there's a lot of things they do in the hospital. I don't think you're going to have to nudge anybody in a hospital staff if you come in and you've been burned to deal with the burn appropriately. Make sure you don't get secondary infection. And then certainly if you have inhaled a lot of smoke, again, there's things they'll do to try and help clear the lungs, and at least get you through that acute crisis. Again, that's their job in a hospital, is to get you through the acute crisis. They're not going to do a whole lot after the fact. But again, this is where I would probably get in the hands of someone who understands the long-term effects of fire, smoke, chemicals, and can do more to help support your lungs and the rest of your body. Dr. Yu is also asking, how many months from the fire do you recommend masking outdoors? Is this going to be more wind pattern dependent? And then how many months from the fires to have air purifiers running all the time? Yeah, I think, that's a great question. And I don't know that we have a solid answer. I mean, I would definitely want to get to a point where the fires near you have been extinguished. I think the further they push away, and also, depending on the way the air flows. So, when the air kind of goes back to its normal offshore pattern, it's going to be blowing a lot of that stuff away from you, in which case it's going to be safer. So I think, probably once, you get to a point where, the fires are extinguished relatively close to you and the stuff that's left burning is now away from you, that's going to reduce that time of, how long you really need to wear the mask outdoors. But I'd say, probably at least for the next, 2 to 3 weeks, there's going to be some air quality issues. And again, the fact that they're not showing it in particulate is great, but I do worry about some of the smoldering. And again, I don't know how long that's going to go on. But again, if you look at the Palisades area, Malibu, the Eaton fires, Altadena, again, I imagine there's probably still some smoldering going on. And again, I don't know how long that's going to take. So I would probably plan on the next at least couple of weeks of masking outdoors, and then kind of keep checking the air quality, and that's probably going to be the safest thing. But I think once the wind pattern kind of goes back to our normal California thing, the good news is it's going to blow a lot of that stuff away from where you're at. Do I like Influence infrared sauna? Yeah, Influence is a good big box sauna. I've had patients and I've recommended it in the past. It's just a bit more expensive and a bit more room, but as a big box sauna, I think they're a good company. And what topicals for the burned area, for body and things to consume internally after leaving the hospital? To allow for proper regeneration, mitigate scarring and nerves and tendons and so forth. So topicals after burns, there's a few things. I mean, topical vitamin E is probably one of the most well-known things, very nutritive to the skin, can help reduce scar tissue. So just getting topical vitamin E can be one of the best things. There's actually a product I like called Gentle Derm that was actually designed for eczema, but I think it works quite well with burns, and that it helps reduce mast cell activation. So hopefully, as the new tissue is laying down, that collagen forms correctly and is going to be less likely to create any kind of scar tissue. But vitamin E would probably be the one thing that would be really very beneficial. Lisa's also asking, if you were to nebulize hydrogen peroxide, can you guide me on what percentage spring water to hydrogen peroxide? I'm not actually a huge fan of doing hydrogen peroxide. I'd rather just do warm saline. And if we're concerned about any kind of other pathogen or thing that might get in there, I use a lot of silver hydrosol, particularly from Argentin 23. Silver hydrosol is a great antimicrobial. Sometimes the hydrogen peroxide, again, if people don't get it quite right, can be a little bit irritating. But for people who do use hydrogen peroxide, if you're going to nebulize it, I would probably not use more than a 10% solution. Again, too much hydrogen peroxide can be very irritating. So basically 9 parts water, 1 part hydrogen peroxide. And again, in a nebulizer, you're using a pretty small volume of that anyway. But I think the Argentin 23 is a little bit safer and it works very well. There's one question here about what environmental concern frequently reporting websites with accurate information are there of those in LA suffering from fires and other environmental calamities around the country? Um, yeah, so the airnow.gov is a very common one. Again, the AQMD's website for at least Southern California is a good one. I think pretty much every state government has their own air quality managing district that you can probably click on. But yeah, the airnow.gov allows you to pick different regions. And again, just be aware of what they're measuring. I mean, they're typically measuring mostly particulate matter. But again, I think it's still a pretty good idea about when the air quality is bad, whether it's because of smog, whether it's because of fire, potentially other pollutants. You know, it does cover a lot of that. Again, they just don't really effectively test for chemicals and or toxic metals. So again, particularly with fire and things like that, where that can be aerosolized, they're not picking up that. But that's probably the most reliable information that we have. Yeah, I'm not aware of other environmental groups that monitor air quality. And to a certain degree, just because of the amount of equipment that's involved in measuring that, they probably don't have the resources. So, yeah, airnow.gov is probably going to be one of your better sources. Michael's also asking, were you going to say some mentions to my dose question? Again, dose, I didn't mention it specifically because dose is going to depend on your size, age, other factors. So I didn't want to get into very specifics for each. So again, generally, it's probably follow the recommendations on the bottle. Um, that's going to be your best bet without having, again, more information about each person and what else they're taking. I didn't want to give that level of specificity. Beyond steam inhalations, which are usually hot air, how can someone with dried out lungs from fires moisten their lungs, assuming that they're dried out? Um, well, again, typically to get something deeper in the lung, you have to nebulize it. It's hard, to inhale something on its own to kind of help moisten the lungs. So often I'll get people, you can buy a nebulizer. They're not super expensive. And I'll let people just nebulize salt water, just saline. Saline, just sometimes moistening the lungs is all you really need. You don't necessarily have to add anything else to it to get the effects. So even for my patients who are having problems with asthma, bronchitis, whatever it is, if we just want to open up their lungs a little bit, it's very safe and easy just to nebulize plain old salt water. And again, sometimes we'll add a little bit of silver hydrosol. Sometimes we'll have people do cromolyn sodium. Sometimes we'll do glutathione. So there are different things you can nebulize. Be careful. I've heard of doctors wanting to nebulize herbs. I don't recommend doing that. Just because herbs are plants. And again, there is material in it. We don't want to put material like that into the lungs that could be a further irritant. So make sure if you are using a nebulizer, whatever you're putting in the nebulizer is safe for nebulizing. But saline is obviously very safe and it's very easy and inexpensive. Well, I think that's all I have for questions. I'll give people about 30 seconds more if there's a last minute thought or question that came to mind. I've got the links listed up there. And again, for those who are tuning in, please feel free to share this with your friends or family. I will put this up on my YouTube channel in the not so distant future. So for anyone who wasn't able to be with us live today, if they're interested, you'll be able to just direct them to my YouTube channel. We'll post it there. and then that'll stay there for the long term. So I don't see any more questions. I appreciate everyone being here tonight. And again, if you're one of those folks who's been directly affected by these fires, I am sorry for everything you're having to go through. I know how challenging and difficult it's been. Again, for our friends and family that have had to deal with these issues, it's been really quite challenging. But for people who live in the greater area, I want to make sure that everyone's being protected as best as possible. So I hope you found this information helpful, and thank you so much for your kind words. And I hope you all have a wonderful night. Thank you.